How's everybody doing today? Good. I hope you're good. Yeah, for the overflows, feel free to come closer. Over here, there's a lot of empty spaces as well. Would definitely like to have you kind of comfortably positioned as well. First of all, thank you so much to Tech in Asia for hosting this event and for being up here on stage. It's definitely an honor for me to be up here and to be speaking to each and every one of you. And it's such a privilege and I don't take it for granted. So really, really happy to be here and really happy to be speaking to you guys. Allow me to introduce myself. I do have Dex, okay. I was about to introduce myself. My name is Vicky. I am one of the partners at 62. Now, 62 is product and design consultancy. We work with different partners in the tech industry, such as Grab, Ticket.com. We work with Genius, we work with Jago, the World Bank, World Resource Institute, CyberCost. We have quite a lot in our portfolio and we're really excited for that. And we're always looking for a challenge. Whenever we look into a project, I think the theme that we always look for is for challenge and how we can innovate the product to become meaningful and also sustainable and scalable products. Before I start with how you're going to do user research, I'm going to start with a quick story time. So I have a sister. My sister's great. I hope you guys, love your sisters as well. But we're like two peas in a pod. We're always going to places together. We have friends which are similar, right? Circle groups, and we also plan trips together and stuff like that. So we're inseparable. So when we were younger, my mom had this big task. Okay, you are now tasked on a mission, and that mission is to go grocery shopping. Okay, simple enough, but back then when we were younger, we didn't really cook. We didn't know ingredients. We checked off all the things in the list. Okay, vegetables check, fruits check. Last thing we knew, we had to get this. It's butter. And there are so many types of butter, guys. And I remember this moment with my sister when I just grabbed like my favorite butter because it has garlic in it. And I love my garlic. So I just grabbed the garlic butter. And then we were like, okay. And my sister was like, why are you grabbing the garlic butter? He's like, because it's garlic. It's so good. And we had an argument right in front of this aisle. And then we kept on arguing, Mom doesn't need that. We want something else. So in the end, my sister had this idea, which was brilliant. Why don't we just call Mom? See what she wants, right? So she picked up the phone, called Mom, and said, oh, I'm gonna be baking cookies. Now, garlic butter doesn't really sound good with cookies, right? So in the end, we went with unsalted butter because obviously there's so many types of butter that we had to consider, but the ones that we are made to baking cookies is the unsalted one. So moral of the story is, isn't it great if we can just pick up the phone, ask our users what they want, and say, okay, what do you need it for? What can you get from it, right? Like, what is the objective of this? Super simple. And that's how product is as well. In product design, there is this thing that everybody should probably know, the double diamond framework. And I love talking about this. I love always reminding myself about it because we get so caught up with work that we forget what the essence of double design actually means. But it always reminds us to diverge when we want, which is in the discover phase, and then converge in the define phase, right? To make sure that we have that explorative mindset and filtering mindset all the time. And when we're talking about understanding our user's problem, we're looking into the discover phase. And that's where we want to try to find all the different problems that they're going through. In 62, we try to use research to inform different parts of the business. If you want to, for example, get a new feature roll out, you want to enter a new market, you want to improve organizational design, or if you want to plan interventions or find product synergies or collaborations with other partners. It's a great way to find that. And at 62, we do this in two ways, which is one, generative, and the other one, evaluative. In a generative research process, what we normally do is we try to find mental models or customer behaviors to understand what they really want and how they're perceiving something, right? Therefore, it informs your project prioritization within the organization. Evaluative research, on the other hand, is more validating. We want to know what the user thinks. We want to assess a potential solution, a potential design that we have already created, so that we know that they can actually use it. And we can do this in a few different ways. I've listed it down here, and I'm actually going to go through a few of the case studies that we at 62 do that you can also probably learn from. So this is a sneak preview of what projects we do at 62. So yeah, it's really exciting. And I'm gonna discuss this through 5 misconceptions and 5 case studies that we did. So people usually think there's bad things about user research, that it's like time consuming, that it's also like conclusive, that it's based on subjective opinions. So I'm gonna debunk these 5 misconceptions along with the 5 case studies that we did at 62. The first misconception is, oh, research is time consuming and it's so expensive. I'm gonna start us off with this first case study. It's a booking platform that we did together with our friends at Ayana. Now, Ayana is a luxury resort. It's a hotel. They have hotels across Jakarta, Bali, Komodo Islands. And what they want to do is they want to improve their booking engine experience for a seamless checkout. Sounds simple enough, right? Sounds super easy, very small scope. Why do we need research for? We want to get into the customer behavior of why they book what they book and why they enjoy luxury experience and why do they decide Ayana above anything else. But before we go into research, we did proper planning. Why? Because without proper planning, research becomes expensive. Imagine not knowing your customers first or who to talk to before getting out there asking questions that we don't know of. So what we did is we did context gathering. We understood the landscape. We did industry mapping. What is out there? What are the huge competitors? What can we learn from them? We also dive deeper into the product itself, their analytics, their click-through rates, their dropouts, where they're spending a lot of their time in, to make sure that all of this is becoming relevant to the users. And then we go into in-depth interviews. From all that, it actually informs a lot of the people that we eventually talk to. For examples, like the different countries that we talked to in the end is because they were the highest customers that are booking in Ayana right now, which OTA platforms they use, and what kind of behavior we can look into when we're talking about the different guests. For example, Australian guests, they have higher spending powers and they're more mature in their booking behavior. So they perceive booking in a different way than a Korean guest who are usually high OTA users and are early bookers. They book way ahead of time. They're also for business, for marketing, for copywriting, for other opportunity in their loyalty program. We map that out. And at 62, since we do design, we map it out into an information architecture. And that's where we see, oh, okay, this is how the information hierarchy should be in the website or in their platform, right? Which kind of tiny detail do we need to include within the pages of the site? And that became key influences as we were designing our product. But again, it all takes proper planning. Without proper planning, it didn't become useful. This research took 2 months, but it gave them a roadmap of 2 years. So you can tell that, sure, it is time consuming, but in the end, it gave them a direction on where to go and what to do next. So I want to revise our misconception here. Research is time-consuming and expensive when done in ignorance. So try to plan out all the research that you're doing. Now, the second misconception that I want to share with you guys is, research is based on subjective opinions, right? It's all opinions. People always say things, they're not really objective. Allow me to introduce you our case study on smart change. Now, this is an exciting project. It's a huge scope project. I'm really excited about this. And it's about the entrepreneurship landscape in Jakarta. Now, I'm pretty sure some of you guys here are startups, right? We've actually talked to some of you guys as well to see what kind of input we can get in order to improve the policy that Jakarta has for micro, small, medium enterprises. So in the end, the goal was to create a policy that works for MSMEs in Indonesia so that they can continue to innovate. For this project, we didn't talk to that was 12 participants in the previous case study, right? 12? We talked to over 300 participants, but this was through surveys. We try to make sure that we gather enough data first before we jump into our final research, right? Our in-depth interviews and talking to each other. So we find opinions through surveys, 300 opinions, and then we filter that down into in-depth interviews together with 6 MSME segments and startups. And from that, we also co-designed our recommendations together with 6 industry categories. So these are all opinions, but at the end, they formulated patterns. And these patterns help us to create recommendations on how Jakarta can improve the entrepreneurial landscape so that they can continue to innovate. And these are our findings. We did a little co-design and mapped it out into 4 different recommendations. And it's so blurry here. But we tried to make sure that we can strengthen the MSME ecosystem. We try to make sure that there's enough literacy, digital literacy, whenever we talk to MSMEs. And how can we build a tech talent reservoir, human resources, right? How can we make sure that they're always readily available and also growing? And how to make sure that the industry is always up to date with the most up-to-date language, right? Or the knowledge that we learn. So you might say that there are all opinions and subjective opinions, but they formulated this 20 recommendations within 4 key areas. And we found that it could benefit it for the startup ecosystem. Without talking to them, we can only assume, and we can only have hypotheses. But we need to make sure that we validate those assumptions together with our data or the customers that we're actually designing for. So I would like to revise this misconception. Research is actually based on relevant and valuable opinions. Now, the third misconception, so we're halfway there, I think. People think that research is a one-time activity. Okay, I did my research. I've mapped out things for the next 2, 4, 3 years. Now, this was an interesting case study that was very recent. We just did this. It's for Blue BCA Digital. So their goal was to find a competitive edge within a very saturated market. We all know that fintech in Indonesia is something, right? It's the hot thing and it's very saturated. So how can we find a differentiator for Blue? So they started off understanding customers' aspirations on what their financial conditions were and what kind of financial instruments they were using. And we did this through a focus group discussion where we gave them a canvas map. And what they can do is they can put stickers on the canvas map, very interactive, very fun, right? And then we did this across 4 different cities: Jakarta, Batam, Samarinda, and Pangkal Pinang. Just to get to make sure that we get all the perspectives. And all these 4 cities are picked within reason as well. So upon finding all the customer aspirations, we understood that, oh, some age groups are actually more prone to some kind of financial behavior. And then when they grow older, they have more financial literacy and their goals are different as well. Now, the slide here is actually redacted, so it's not the actual slide that we have on the report, but the overall sense on financial aspirations was met when we finally create our report. But wait, isn't finance, such a huge spectrum? There's so many things within finance that we need to consider. So Blue came back to us right after that first research. They were like, why don't we talk about Blue Invest and Blue Loyalty? Because we want to get into that investment space. We want to understand how people are behaving within the investment sphere. Because when we say financial aspirations, there's savings, there's investment, there's transactions, there's so many things, right? So we try to make sure that we dive deeper. And our first research became a direction to our next research. And from that research, we went again to talk to our customers, make sure we evaluate a lot of the products that Blue existingly have, also evaluated the collaborations that they have or the synergies that they have together with their current partners, Moduit and Fantastic. So we found that there were a lot of product positioning items that we've understood from that research, and we boiled it down to user archetypes. What type of users are usually invested in investment, pun intended? And what kind of users are actually more mature? Which ones are actually big spenders, high risk profiles? We understood that by talking to our customers and mapping them out into user archetypes. We also mapped out their loyalty program for priority's sake. Again, the slide is redacted, but all the X's are actually features. And these features are being mapped out into which ones are most desired and which ones are least desired. And this helps out in product prioritization as well in the end. So, do we think that research is a one-time thing? Research is always an iterative process. One research could potentially lead to another, and to another, and to another, right? And sometimes we only touch surface level stuff in our first research. We always want to go deeper and find out what feature or what next problem do we want to tackle in a deeper level. Our fourth misconception is research is optional. Okay, so we can go by without research. It's fine, We'll just use our assumptions. Our next project here is actually a very interesting one again. It's together with the World Bank. And the World Bank has a goal of reducing poverty in villages. And they want to make sure that villages innovate. So they try to give them funds. And they want to make sure that the funds used in the different villages is actually well spent. Now we came up with an idea. So before going into research, we did our planning, we did understanding different things, and it was an app. Now people in the village, who uses an app? So we had this big assumption that an app is not the answer. It's not an app, it's not an app. So we came there, we did our research together with the village stakeholders. We created a storyboard, a comic strip, of what it would be if they were to use an app in their reporting. Will it be something that they want to use? And then we had a few discussions. We did a survey as well, more discussions. And from that, we understood that, hey, a lot of them are actually a lot more tech savvy than we actually thought. And most of the challenge actually lies in the infrastructure, in signal. It's always offline. But technology or mobile phones is quite accessible. when we found out, when we go into the different villages. And we only knew when we asked them, right? When we meet them. So this was in Kupang, in Desa Soy. I was there and I got to talk to some of the people as well. We got to talk to people and understood what kind of like burdens do these village assistants have. And most of it, they're always doing ad hoc stuff. Aren't we all always doing ad hoc stuff? And a lot of administrative work. And at the end, how can we try to balance it out into something that is more equal, right? How can we make sure that all the administrative stuff becomes a lot more smaller so that the village assistants can do a lot more meaningful items that is empowering the village stakeholders? So we did this and we created a solution, which is an app, yes, but we made sure that with the app itself, we try to find inspirations from platforms that they already use. So it would be super simple and it also can accommodate if there are any offline behaviors. And this would all be synchronized in the end when they do find signal. And not only that, our research actually informs their 4-year roadmap from the beginning of 2020 all the way to 2024 with the different ecosystem players that is going to be involved in building that program. So, do you think research is optional for this case? If we didn't know that an app was useful for them, how could we know that what to build or how to build it? What kind of ecosystem, what influences do they look into, right? So research is essential. And that could be just one of the projects that I share with you, but it could be for any of the features that you're building. How do you know whether or not your users actually need them? My last misconception is that research is conclusive. People say that, okay, once the research is done, it actually is a final say. Nothing else can beat it. That's all. So I'm gonna bring up a case study, which I think one of our clients are here as well to witness this, which is Jago, Bang Jago. For this case study, we're supposed to create a UX standard strategy and measurement model for Jago's value, which is on life centricity. Now, okay, how can we measure life? That was the big question that we have. How can we measure the immeasurable? How can we create a framework that makes sure that everything that we produce within the projects are aligned with the value? And we did that through research. And what we did is we talked to our customers. We found different spectrums of lifestyles. And these spectrums are like, I would say, the outliers. So they have an extreme type of lifestyle. You can call them, some of them are like the investment bros, right? Those who are always investing. We created a profile for the K-poppers, you know, those ones who are actually in that kind of sphere of lifestyle. We went with the eco-conscious lifestyle as well. So going through the spectrum of different lifestyles help us to map out, okay, what is actually something that they find meaningful within their lives. So we did our round of stakeholder interviews. We did our landscape analysis. We did our in-depth interviews. Again, we need proper planning before getting into research. And getting the personas over there, getting the types of people that we were going to interview didn't take overnight. It took weeks until we find the right people to test out our framework, our kind of measurement, and our standards. And in the end, we created a model where the Jago team can continue to use that framework to assess whether or not their feature is life-centric enough or not. And we measure to them through different values, and this is the value map of life centricity and life fulfillment. It gives us that direction. Which components are going into life centricity? And how do we map it out together? And that became a value kind of a formula So for whenever we try to create a new product, whether or not these values are aligned with the life centricity model. And it helped us create a framework to assess any new feature built. Not only features, but also copywriting messages, new product, new business models, anything at all. So yeah, research actually gives us a lot of direction. It's not necessarily conclusive, it's iterative. It gives us an idea. It shortens our it validates a few of our ideas as well and our assumptions. But it also continues to give us direction. So my bottom line is that research shows a lot of maturity. When we involve research whenever we're building something, it actually helps us to scale up, and not only within a short period of time. It helps us scale up within a long term, be it 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, and potentially even more. That's all, and I may take one question, I guess.
We have time for more. Go ahead.
Okay,
Any questions from the floor?
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Vicky.
Yes, afternoon.
Thank you for the explanation. It's really helped me a lot because I'm doing product research right now. So
Yeah.
all of the study case that you explained to us, you always mention that you always planning before you do the research. And from what I got, that is all of the study case have a different planning because have a different goals obviously. So
Yes.
I want to ask, there is any tips or tricks that you always do when you want to planning research? Thank you.
So things to consider while we're planning for research. I think the most basic one is to make sure what is the objective of the research is figured out. So we do have projects where we don't have an idea of what research objective we have. And that's where we try to make sure we have stakeholder alignments, right? Make sure that we synchronize first before we go into research to make sure that this is the objective that we want to achieve. So whether it is like, okay, scaling up the booking engine or like creating a new policy recommendation, we need to make sure that the objective is fixed. Now, once the objective is fixed, it's easier to understand, okay, what kind of behavior patterns do we want to observe, right? Whether it's booking behavior again, or like whether it's maybe per se trip planning, it could go on in a different route. Like research planning can go into different ways and different routes, but we need to make sure we understand the context and industry background first. And since we're a consultancy, it's not often that we understand their industry. Maybe for finance, we're quite used to it or quite accustomed. But if industries are like NFTs, for example, we'll need to make sure we do our ground research first. We need to make sure we map out our competitors, our people who potentially we can work with or collaborate with as well, what they're doing well, and see how we can ask those questions into our customers as well. And it doesn't make sense if we're researching on NFT, but the customers do not use NFT, unless your research is to make sure to acquire new users, right? So all these goes back to the proper planning within recruitment, the different people that we are going to be recruiting, their research respondent criteria, their age group, what they're interested in, and we usually have screener questions as well. So before they even attend an interview, we'll give them a screener question, sharing a few of the things that they used to do. So for example, the Ayana example that I shared just now, before we got to interview them, we made sure that they were from different OTAs. So there was a good amount of like people from booking.com, good amount of people from Agoda, or like from the Red Envelope site in China. Made sure that there's an equal amount of that before we actually call them in for interview. And that usually takes a long time, but it is worth it because you're talking to the right people and not just an assumption of people. And because the answers in the end would be a lot more rich. So if your research objective is a lot more narrow, it's usually easier to it's usually a bit more tricky to get the criteria because your criteria would be very niche. But then if your research objective is really broad, you probably would get a broader criteria. So just understanding the balance of understanding the landscape, what we're trying to achieve, and what the research is trying to achieve, that would help you to create a better planning for the research. I hope that answers.
Let's take one more question from the floor. Gentleman in blue over.
Thank you. I think a lot of things that you have mentioned today related to user direct research, and I think that's really great. But as we all know, I think today the internet is amazing. Like there's a lot of information already, and most of the times there are people that have done similar, if not identical, research or things. So my question is, how much? What is the composition? What is the percentage of the time that you spend doing user research versus like desk research or internet research, and why? Thank you.
Yes. So usually what we do, and this is also part of planning, is that we'll do desk research first, and whatever desk research we won't get, we'll try to do primary research. That's where we ask questions. And so from the desk research, we formulate hypotheses, assuming that, okay, a lot more people are accustomed to booking through phone calls when they're an older generation, for example, whereas the younger generation is booking through online. So we know that assumption. Do we want to target the older generation or the younger generation? So those kind of things actually help to direct our primary research. So that's how we try to use it. Desk research is usually for research planning. We'll usually cap it maximum at like 1.5 weeks because you can always find new things if you find it. You can always find new things. So we try to give a time frame, about 1.5 to 2 weeks on desk research and landscape analysis to make sure that we have enough before we get into our primary research or our field research. And that usually is quite directive. And in terms of how much time you spend in research in general, it's usually also upon initiative, right? What are your initiatives on? So we need to make sure that we're just not doing research for the sake of research, because that would be, again, expensive, right? We need to make sure that we have a clear goal, a clear business item that we want to tackle. Then we go into research. So I would say, like, even if you're doing a generative research, like twice a year would actually be suffice. But it really depends, because in the end, you're going to do a lot of evaluative research as well, because you want to validate whether or not the product that you're building is according to what users want, and they can help to assess it. So a lot more evaluative, and they're usually much cheaper. So yeah, so that's kind of like the balance.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Vicky, thanks.
Yes, thank you.